Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea decides to give up its status as a developing country at the WTO, a status with which it has enjoyed special treatment in trade. Under pressure from the U.S., Korea will now, in principle, have to open up its agriculture market. President Moon Jae-in orders officials to come up with a plan by next month to reform college admissions. The aim is to fight corruption by reducing the influence of powerful parents. And South Korea celebrates its easternmost islets of Dokdo, a key part of the nation's territory that it's been forced to defend from repeated false claims by Japan. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. President Moon Jae-in has called for the overhaul of the current education system. In a meeting this morning, he ordered a reform plan to be drawn up by next month that reflects the public's call for a college admissions system that's fairer and based more on objective criteria. Park Ki-jun reports.
President Moon Jae-in has instructed government officials to draw up a plan for the reform of the college admission system by November, reflecting public calls for fairer practices in education.
교육이 공정하지 않다는 국민의 냉엄한 평가를 회피하고 미래로 가는 교육 혁신을 얘기할 수 없습니다. 공정한 교육 제도로 국민의 신뢰를 회복하는 것이 지금 이 시기 가장 중요한 교육 개혁 과제입니다.
On Friday, President Moon held a meeting with relevant ministers in Seoul to re-examine the current college entrance system for the first time since taking office. It comes just days after he highlighted its importance in his budget speech at the National Assembly earlier this week, amid allegations that the daughter of former Justice Minister Cho Guk used fake documents and family influence to get into college and grad school. The president pointed to the biggest problem being the overly high assessment of extracurricular achievements for college admission.
수시에 대한 신뢰가 형성될 때까지 서울의 주요 대학을 중심으로 수시와 정시 비중의 지나친 불균형을 해소할 방안을 조속히 마련해 주기 바랍니다.
Regular admissions focus more on college scholastic ability test scores. That means more transparency and less emphasis on non-academic activities like internships and volunteer work, reducing the influence of powerful parents. However, as the measures alone are insufficient, President Moon says there also needs to be a way to ensure a more impartial screening of students' records. He added that the system of preferential treatment for applicants from prestigious high schools should also be reviewed. No specific plan came out of the meeting, but the Education Ministry recommended an increase in the proportion of regular admissions to at least 30% for each university last year, based on a survey by the Public Debate Committee. Education Minister Yoon Eun-hae, who was at the meeting, said a plan to readjust the percentage will be ready by the November deadline. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un this week ordered that all South Korean buildings at the North's Mount Geumgang resort be torn down. Now the regime is offering to discuss the matter. According to Seoul's Unification Ministry, the North sent the proposal this morning, suggesting a written rather than a face-to-face exchange. The government says it will work actively to protect the rights of the building's South Korean owners. Before replying to the North, it said it will consult with related agencies and stakeholders. Ordering the building's removal, according to a report 2 days ago, Kim Jong-un said the buildings are ugly and need to be replaced with what he called modern North Korean-style facilities. North Korea and China, which recently celebrated 70 years of bilateral ties, might be considering an investment deal that could violate international sanctions. China would reportedly get to extract North Korea's rare earth minerals, supplies of which are used in high-tech products. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
In order to overcome its dire power shortages, North Korea may have offered China concessions for the mining of its rare earths in exchange for the building of a solar power plant. That's according to the homepage of the China-based Association for Rare Earth, which cited local industry news sources and multiple sources familiar with the matter. Rare earths are used for the production of cell phones and electronics, and any exchange of North Korean rare earths is a violation of United Nations sanctions placed on the North. The homepage said the proposal submitted by North Korea stated that if China invests in the building of a solar power plant in Pyongyang, the North will allow China to mine rare earths. The plant is expected to cost $2.5 billion for construction and generate 2.5 million kilowatts of electricity. Local media outlets in South Korea have cited various sources as saying the number of Chinese tourists to the north is also estimated to have risen by more than 50% on year to some 150,000, mainly due to Beijing's full support. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea is negotiating how much it's going to pay next year to have American troops stationed here. In the meantime, the Trump administration is raising the pressure on other American allies, like those in NATO, to pay more as well. Hong Yu reports.
The U.S. campaign to get NATO allies to contribute more to defense expenses began before Defense Secretary Mark Esper headed to Brussels for a meeting with NATO defense ministers. Talking to reporters in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday local time, Esper said that some NATO members are not paying the shared defense costs promised.
Something that we expect of all of our partners and allies, whether it's Asia or Europe, is to help share the cost, share the burden of either housing, hosting our troops on their land, or supporting them in deployments, whatever the case may be.
When he arrived at Brussels, Esper said there can be no free riders to their shared security. He added that all must do their part to deter war and defend the alliance regardless of geographic location, size, or population. The U.S. had taken the burden of paying for 70% of the NATO defense expenditure because European countries have felt burdened by defense spending and have been reluctant to increase their defense spending since the end of the Cold War. And the pressure from the U.S. for those countries to increase their share of defense costs is getting stronger. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in an interview with a Kansas newspaper on Thursday local time that other countries must share the burden for not just the security of the world, but for the security of their own countries. As the U.S. continues to pressure countries to up their defense spending, South Korea could face difficulty in reaching agreeable terms with the U.S. on defense cost sharing. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Today, October 25th, marks the 20th Dokdo Day, a celebration of South Korea's easternmost islets. Dokdo has a special place in the hearts of the Korean people and in the country's history, as Japan in modern times has repeatedly laid false claim to them. Our Lee Jae-yong takes a look at the efforts made to protect Dokdo.
On this day in 1900, Korea first declared Dokdo as its territory. King Gojong of the Korean Empire made a statement against Japan, which was attempting to dispossess the Korean peninsula of its properties ahead of its invasion.
When it comes to claiming sovereignty of Dokdo, Korea made such a statement before Japan.
100 years later, a private organization, a Party for Dokdo Protection, designated October 25th as Dokdo Day, with this year marking the 20th such day. Despite the historical evidence, Tokyo until this day claims its ownership over the islands, calling them Takeshima. So Seoul continues its fight backed by the people's collective efforts.
Government efforts are important, but efforts at the civilian level are changing a lot.
Many South Koreans have voluntarily participated in campaigns protecting Dokdo, and one of their main agenda was letting the world know that Dokdo belongs to Korea. They pressure global firms like Apple and Google to rename the disputed islands to Dokdo on their maps, while sharing related contents on social media like YouTube and Instagram to raise global awareness. Even young students have played their part. Some middle and high school students from Cheongsim International Academy have created a statue of the symbol of Dokdo, Gangchi, which is a species of sea lion currently at the risk of extinction. They donated the statue to a museum on Japanese colonial history. They also visit the islands each year, wrote a book on Gangchi, and raised funds by selling related goods to continue their activities. All these efforts play a crucial role in protecting Dokdo and will continue in the future. Lee Jae-yong, Arirang News.
South Korea is giving up its status as a developing country at the WTO, meaning it will lose certain special treatment on trade. This has been a demand of President Trump's, who's argued that Korea and other countries are too wealthy to be considered developing. Kim Hae-sung reports.
South Korea has decided to abandon its developing nation status at the WTO. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said Friday that South Korea has made the decision given its economic standing as the world's 12th largest economy with a national income of over $30,000 per capita, as well as the changing external environment.
Within the WTO, not only advanced countries but developing countries have raised the issue of special treatment given to South Korea due to its developing nation status. Several countries that are similar in economic size or standing to South Korea, such as Singapore, Brazil, and Taiwan, have said they would not demand special treatment as developing nations.
Countries with developing nation status at the WTO are given special treatment such as longer transition periods for implementing trade agreements and technical assistance. South Korea joined the WTO in 1995 as a developing nation and has maintained its developing country status in the areas of agriculture and climate change to allow it to provide subsidies for farmers and impose higher tariffs on agricultural imports. In July, President Trump accused 11 countries that are among the world's richest economies, including South Korea, Singapore, and China, of abusing the developing nation status. He said that the U.S. would stop treating such countries as developing nations should the WTO fail to make substantial progress within 90 days, which was October 23rd. So far, Singapore, Brazil, Taiwan, and the UAE have announced that they would give up developing nation status. The finance minister says South Korea won't be given special treatment as a WTO developing nation in future trade agreements, but there won't be any changes to previously signed trade deals. He added the government will do everything it can to protect sensitive agricultural areas like rice and allocate an increased budget of $13 billion for the agricultural industry next year. 김혜성, Arirang News.
South Korea's consumer sentiment rose for the second consecutive month in October. According to the Bank of Korea, the consumer sentiment index came to 98.6 for this month, up 1.7 points from September. The central bank attributed the rise to optimism over the U.S.-China trade negotiations and higher stock prices. But the figure is still below 100, meaning there are more pessimists than optimists about the economy. But inflation expectations edged down 0.1 percentage points to 1.7%, the lowest figure since the data was first released in 2002. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Friday, and for that I'm joined by Dr. Kim Se-wan, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Dr. Kim, thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon.
So as we just heard, Korea has decided to give up its status as a developing country for the purposes of trade. President Trump, for one, has been asking that this be done. The argument is that Korea is a lot better off than it used to be, and the benefits it gets from that status are not fair. How big of an effect will this have on the local economy?
Well, since Korea decided to give up developing country status at WTO, Korea has to open agricultural market to foreign countries, including United States. I believe the most affected part of the economy would be agricultural producers like farmers. It is very actually hard to be recognized as a developing country for any longer in current economic situation of the Korea. But the impact on farmers are not small at all. For example, for the case of the rice import, there is over 500% tariffs and over 400,000 ton quotas. So that means Korean government is removing all these barriers for agricultural products imports. So as I said, Korea will be given up the developing country status because of this Korean economy's new situation, which is larger and bigger than before.
Right. So as you say, Korea will have to give up these protection measures for products like rice, garlic, ginseng, and so on. The government, though, said today it'll do everything it can for these sectors. What can Korea do to keep prices from falling off a cliff?
Actually, at WTO, Korea will be going through multilateral negotiations with other nations. And that means Korean governments give up something subsidies and tariffs will be removed not right away. It is said that for reaching agreement with other countries, it will be taken at least 3 to 5 years. So Korea has a kind of 3 to 5 years time buffer for preparing the loss of agricultural industries.
Right. Well, meanwhile, growth estimates falling really all over the world, but for the Chinese economy as well. Premier Lee Jae-yong said this week that China will be taking steps to keep investment and trade stable, also by opening up. What would that do for the Chinese economy?
China's first half economic growth was 6% on annual basis, and recently OECD forecast this year's China's growth rate would be 6.1%. So these figures of growth are simply the lowest growth rate in the last 30 years. So this low growth is partially driven by U.S.-China trade conflicts. And in addition to this, some foreign corporations are moving their production facilities from China to other nations like India and Vietnam. So Chinese government decision to increase agricultural products imports from U.S. is a desperate countermeasure to lessen the pressure from the United States.
Right. He didn't put it that way, but it's a concession, I suppose. So also here in Korea, growth slowing down. The central bank is expecting growth of under 2% this year for the first time in a decade. Is the Korean economy really in such bad shape?
Yes, actually, it is true that Korean economy is declining, but not so fast as of now. Korean growth rate goes down below 2% this year, and that would be the first time after 2008 global economic crisis. Actually, from the beginning of this year, the declining phase of Korean economy was weakened by expensive government spending. But as of now, government does not have more resources to boost up economy until next year's new budget. So if we take a look at the components of the GDP, consumption has been grown by almost 0%, and facilities grows like 0%. But construction investment has been decreased by 5%. So altogether, that made 0.4% of the economic growth for the third quarter of this year.
Right. Well, you mentioned the government's budget as a tool to boost growth. That budget's worth over 500 trillion won, which is around $440 billion. How much help might that be for the economy?
The 513 trillion won super expansionary government budget of next year is a necessary measure to stimulate economic growth, along with, of course, expansionary monetary policy. But the fact is we can't continue this super expansionary fiscal policy for long because government debt is increasing over time. So it is important to know that governments and private sector together should be trying to reconstruct the weakened and less competitive industries and improving the productivity of the laborers in the long run.
Got it, Dr. Kim. All right, we'll have to leave it there today. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.
And with Japan restricting key exports to Korea, the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry is playing a key role in helping diversify the country's supplies of these products. The chamber will hold a seminar next Monday on industrial cooperation between Korea and France. Also there will be Seoul's Trade Ministry and the French Chamber of Commerce. On Tuesday, the KCCI will join up with the American Chamber to host a conference on trends in the local IT industry and the U.S. parts and materials industries. This is thought to be part of an event put on this week by the Trade Ministry to promote cooperation on parts and materials. And it's expected to include exchanges with other countries like Germany and Israel. Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman Lee Jae-yong is back in court today for a hearing on his conviction for bribery in the scandal that brought down former President Park Geun-hye. The Seoul High Court's been ordered by the Supreme Court to reconsider his suspended sentence of 2.5 years, saying that sentence failed to include other bribes. He should also be sentenced, the Supreme Court said, for donating 3 horses to the former president's friend to curry favor. Arriving at the Seoul High Court this morning, Lee apologized to the Korean people for causing trouble. He was released after serving a year of the shorter sentence. Apple's iPhone 11 series has finally been released in South Korea. 3 mobile carriers, SKT, KT, and LGU Plus, took pre-orders until Thursday. They got about as many as they did with the last iPhone. The mobile industry expected demand to be lower because the iPhone 11 does not support 5G. But because customers have been less than impressed with the quality of Korea's 5G network, there were more orders than expected. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the first Korean movie. For the last century, movies have become one of the most popular leisure activities in the country. But for those with visual and hearing impairments, opportunities to enjoy them have been less easily available. In the third part of our Korean movie series this week, our Choi Jung-yoon tells us how things are changing.
Meet Jung Mi-ryung, a 55-year-old woman who enjoys movies differently than most of us. She comes to this particular cinema in Seoul once every month at 2 p.m. sharp. Instead of booking tickets online, she gets her ticket at a temporary ticket booth, where people from deaf and blind associations distribute special movie tickets. Blind for 12 years, she's been asked how she can watch a movie. But she says all she needs to do is just listen.
Since I went blind, I can only enjoy movies with an audio explanation. It's the same story, only without images. I listen to the acting, the facial expressions of characters, how well it's written, and what kind of sounds it has. But only a few movies are remade as barrier-free movies.
Barrier-free movies are films with audio description to explain what is happening on the screen, or Korean subtitles that narrate dialogue, music, and sound so that the handicapped can enjoy movies. The first barrier-free film in Korea started off in the First Persons with Disabilities Film Festival in 2000, organized by the Korea's Association of the Deaf. Then in 2012, 2 barrier-free movies were screened at regular cinemas under the production of professional movie directors, actors, and scriptwriters. While previous versions faithfully explained the various on-screen action, the Korean Barrier-Free Films Committee gathered movie officials to make the first high-quality barrier-free versions that describe the overall context and how they were acted by the cast. However, there's still a way to go in terms of limited screenings.
The selections are very limited. Cinemas and times are also restricted. I wanted to see Joker, but couldn't. As international films require subtitles, I cannot enjoy them unless the dialogue is dubbed into Korean along with audio descriptions.
To better promote inclusive cultures of people in different forms, KOBAF holds education programs and screens self-made barrier-free films for free.
The visually and hearing impaired are not in the circle of commercial audiences. In order for the disabled and others to enjoy movies together in one space, we need a closed system which offers selective subtitles and audio descriptions, such as smart glasses and applications for subtitles and headphones for audio services.
Kim added, social recognition and help at the government level are needed to implement such infrastructure for a barrier-free society. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.